Reddit users, what paranormal activities have you seen? One weekend, while I was at my dad's house, he went to the upstairs bathroom to shave, and I heard footsteps in my sister's room. At first, I thought it was him walking round, so I got up to find him standing at her closed door. He looks back at me, and you can hear whispers, too. I nodded, and in the 2 seconds it took my dad to open the door, he went inside and checked her TV, which had never been on, and discovered that my stepsister was asleep. It seemed that she had never been awake and that there was no way she could have crossed the room, gotten into bed, and pretended to be that convincingly asleep. She had one of those large ones from the 1990s that would get warm when the radio was turned on, and the radio hadn't been on either. So we assumed it might have been the beat of a song or something. After that, we heard footsteps a lot, usually very early in the morning. Some of the footsteps were so heavy that they would shake the dining room ceiling fan right beneath her bedroom, and they had once or twice woken her up. Every time I took a shower at my dad's, I always, after months of feeling that way and never talking to anyone about it, my dad asked me one day if I ever felt like someone was in the shower with me when I was here. I eventually became so anxious and paranoid that I refused to take a shower at home or even enter the upstairs bathroom. Experienced the same thing growing up in the house. My parents swore down it was haunted by something really unpleasant after we moved out. I also had the same feeling as a child in my mother's room, where I felt like something was always staring at me from the corner of the room or right above me. Nothing I did could make the feeling go away, and other family members did the same. I don't want to take over your comment, but it's good that someone else had that experience, and guests began sharing the same story, either because they saw a face staring at them or because they felt it. We also had a lot of other, more serious incidents, like my brother's covers being torn off him in the middle of the night, and the man I saw standing in the laundry room when I was 9 years old. It's funny because once you've gone through these experiences, they last a lifetime. I've never forgotten anything because it was all so frightening, and it happened more than 20 years ago. Your mind tries to make sense of what's happening, why someone is standing by you or staring at you, why you're seeing all. When I was 6 years old, I slept on a bunk bed in a room by myself. The bottom bunk was empty and was intended for my younger brother, but he was too afraid to sleep in a bed alone, so I was by myself. A physically formed person who couldn't possibly be there in front of you and you can't. And it makes your mind absolutely trip music out. I recall feeling cold that night, but it quickly became really warm, most likely because I was having some kind of night terror. I started breathing heavily, opened my eyes, and saw that the room was empty. A small night light in the corner of the room helped me fall back asleep. But as I closed my eyes, I felt a heavy hand caress my head. It took me 12 years to stop sleeping with my head under the covers because of that memory. My mom, of course, knew a woman who had died in that apartment before we moved in, so she covered my head and continued petting my shoulder when I lay back down, my eyes ripped open, and there was nobody else in the room, on for different occasions. Over the course of 5 years, I saw a middle-aged man wearing a flannel shirt, blue jeans, and a red shirt. I always thought it was that woman trying to console me. My family's old house backed onto a fairly substantial forested ravine. I slept on the ground floor, and my room was at the back of the house. I should point out that this was a relatively new construction in a small city suburb, and the only area that had previously existed was forest. I believe he lost his dog in the ravine at some point. He would walk through my room with a dog leash in his hand, stopping for a moment at the same spot each time to look around, before continuing towards the ravine. It's strange that you saw someone with your own eyes in your home for times, but it didn't frighten or worry me in the least. He was just an ordinary guy, and I doubt that there was ever any history of murders or accidents in the area, especially since we moved in 5 years after the house was constructed. There were no previous owners to check into because I went to high school with the previous owner's child. I like to think he found the dog and is happy forever, but I know that's not the case. During summer vacation in high school, I went to the country with my best friend's grandparents. I stayed in his mother's old room in Japan, which had a small wall closet with a smaller closet door that was about 3 feet wide. and a 1.5 feet tall above it. It was an odd design, but their house is old, and during the first few weeks, I was a little jet-lagged in Japan because it was hot and muggy, although I always felt uneasy about that tiny closet area if my light was off at night. Something about it seemed darker than the rest of the room. Toward the end of the second week, I began to get used to the time difference, but one morning, when I woke up, I noticed that the small door was open. It was unnerving, but I closed it and simply thought maybe it wasn't completely shut and came loose. A few nights later, I woke up feeling uneasy. It was dark, and I could see that a small door was open. The room was much darker than the rest of it, like pitch black. This was the first and only time I ever felt paralyzed. I was too afraid to speak or do anything. After that, I don't recall sleeping that night, but I have to since I remember waking up the following morning and telling my friend about it. He said his mother had told him about it as well. When we returned home, I spoke with his parents, and his mother made a joke with me. So I heard you met the I used to wake up at 3 in the morning and feel like I was being watched all the time in my mom's former apartment. Every night when I woke up, I heard a woman's voice calling my name. I didn't recognize it, but she continued to do so while approaching my bed and getting closer. But I saw nothing. I freaked out, jumped out of my bed, and ran into my brother's room, where I hopped into bed with him. My mother still doesn't believe that happened, but fortunately we only lived there for a few years. I tried to wake him up, but the punk still sleeps like the dead. I heard her footsteps follow me until his doorway, and after that, every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I just ran into his room and slept on the top bunk. Months after moving out, I experienced a similar occurrence as a teenager. I started waking up around 3 in the morning. Every night, there was a bathroom attached to my bedroom that I think was the source of it. It had the worst energy, and no matter how many times we tried to fix it or change the bulbs, I always refused to use it. I felt like something was going to hurt me. It was just this terrible, not dreadful, feeling in my stomach. My dog would frequently wake up with his hackles up, wiring. The lights were constantly flickering this unsightly green color, and the shower had a sliding door. Occasionally, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I could hear the door rattling violently in its frame. The fan and air conditioner had not turned on, and this only ever happened at 3 in the morning. Fortunately for my sanity, the shower door never slammed against the sides in the dark bathroom, so I would lie awake staring at it, waiting for it to slide open of its track, but the bathroom door itself remained closed. I had a buddy over once, and he woke up around 3 in the morning. I hadn't told him anything about what I had been going through, but just before I moved out, I went in to clean that bathroom in preparation for the house's sale, and he turned to me while I was using my computer and said he had felt extremely scared all of a sudden, and that he wasn't sure what had woken him up. There was a faint hum, like a woman singing, and no one else was home, so I stopped to listen. It was very brief and quiet, and I heard it again, loud and clear, right in my left ear. I ran outside and didn't return until everyone was home, because my mother wouldn't let me speak to her. My brothers later acknowledged that they had attempted a ghost hunt in what they believed to be my haunted bathroom one afternoon while I was away at soccer practice, but even they were wary of it. I believe she was afraid of something because she would very angrily shut me down whenever I tried to bring it up loudly, shushing me and saying she didn't want to hear it. Nothing crazy ever happened, so I'm not sure if I was just crazy or not. I just remember the constant worry when I was 11 years old, when my parents flew to Houston to see a specialist for my dad's lymphoma, which had just returned from remission, but there was no reason to believe he was in any immediate danger. I was riding my bike at the time. The day they were to fly back, they stopped my bike in a ditch that we used to ride down and up on the way back. When I reached the top, I was overcome with emotion, and without even understanding what I was saying, I informed my riding companion that my dad had recently passed away. My friend said, "What?" I just knew he passed away an hour before I got home from school, so I didn't call the school or speak to anyone I knew before riding in the ditch. I spent the rest of the way home trying to find my grandparents, my dad's parents, bawling on our back porch. I stood there for a few minutes, watching them in the doorway. There was no reason to believe he was even close to dying when that wave hit me again. He had contracted pneumonia while in Houston and passed away from it. My father had suffered a severe heart attack many years prior, and on the day of the incident, I felt strange. Hard to put into words, but something wasn't right. I don't believe in paranormal activity, but my grandparents' house is regarded by many as being extremely haunted. It's part of a tour of haunted houses in the Los Angeles area, and legend claims that it served as inspiration for American Horror Story. I learned that morning that he had the attack, tales, but the one I personally experienced was when I was around 6 years old and my older sister was 12. We shared a room, and my mother had adorned our bedside table with an old telephone that was unplugged and inoperable. My sister and I were sleeping when, for some reason, we both woke up at the same moment and turned to face. We both thought it was a dream, because we didn't talk about it for years. But one day when she was discussing it, we realized we had experienced the exact same thing. There are so many examples of this. I remember feeling a great sense of dread before the phone rang. We locked eyes and hid under our blankets until it stopped ringing. I'm an atheist and don't believe in the spiritual or supernatural, but I had the strangest experience at my mother's house. She and my sister were certain it was haunted, even though I never lived there after I moved away to attend college. How do you make those truths true? Jive. They kept complaining about the upstairs' haunted faucets turning on and off, doors moving, and other issues for a while Mom was going through a divorce. I blamed it on poor construction and a lien to the house, but one day I was taking a shower when I felt a soft thumb from the bedroom wrap up my shower in the bathtub, which I was home alone at the time, and I have no idea what happened. I believe it's a combination of coincidence and people being conditioned to be afraid based on the stories. So every coincidence becomes meaningful, but it's true that some of the stories, especially my own, were balled up and thrown across the room into a bookshelf at least 10 feet away. It's very difficult to explain moms and grandmothers who aren't superstitious. For example, one grandma said she could tell my grandpa was angry from the back of his head and the way he was sitting when she woke up from sleep and asked him what was wrong. But he didn't turn or acknowledge her. My grandma glanced over for a moment as my real grandfather came in from the restroom, and the man at the end of the bed was gone. It's also plausible that ghosts exist or that everyone in my family, not only me, but also a security guard I worked with when I owned a dispensary, are compulsive liars. She actually sent me the video, which I still have on my phone. It shows her young daughter playing on her bed when the camera in her room slides away from the wall by about a foot. The daughter then jumps off the bed and flees the room to tell her mother. Later, the daughter got up at random and walked toward and out the front door. When the mother was calling after her daughter lost her temper, the security guard called a priest, who literally passed by and attempted to perform an exorcism on the apartment or something. A week later, an electrical outlet behind a couch that she had never used caught fire, and the entire— I'm normally a pretty big skeptic, but I'm not sure how to explain the video edit to working in G-Link. Apparently, the original link was erased. My brother and his girlfriend were on the phone once when she began to claim that she could hear an elderly woman asking my brother for a drink of water. Since no one else was around, he disregarded her insistence, but she persisted, so he hung up and went to check on our grandmother, who was in her bedroom, only to discover her dead a few years later at 11 o'clock p.m. I was chatting to a girl on the phone when I spotted a man riding a bicycle past the windowsill where my brother was. I asked her if she was still there after she stopped talking, expressed regret because she believed I had gotten into trouble. I told her no and asked why, to which she replied, "Someone told me to stop talking on the phone. It's late. Go to bed." I was on my own. Everyone in the house was already asleep. I asked if it was an elderly woman, and she replied that it was, telling her it was my grandma and my brother experienced the same thing. She began talking about ghosts and other things, so I told her I was going to end the call and ran to my room. My dad was in the hospital about 40 miles away from me with a serious brain tumor, and he wasn't in any condition to even stay awake one night. I was talking to a buddy on MSN those days, and he asked how my dad was. I turned to my left, and he was sitting in his chair, staring at me. I answered, "I think he's okay," to which my friend replied, "Isn't he in the hospital?" I checked again, but nothing was there, and I never told anyone when I was in the hospital. I remember sitting at home in my chair, you were on the computer, and you looked at me. I must have been seeing things. Friend, Dad survived, and he's still here today. Fast forward to about 21 years later, and I met up with my dad. We just talked, and he says something has been on my mind for years, son, and I can't get it off. I'm glad your dad is doing better now, and that you have this opportunity to share. Thank you. I can say that it was a wholesome moment for me because he looked great and healthy while his physical body was dying at the hospital. That's what makes this story so wonderful. I told him about my experience because it felt too real to be a dream, a little more eerie. Let's say that his brain tumor disappeared prior to the procedure. They had to perform for CAT scans to make sure nothing was missing, and they still don't know what caused ADV to disappear. He occasionally gets a half-numb face, but that's it. Thank you for the kind words. A friend and I traveled from Northern California to International Falls, Minnesota, when I was 18 in 2008. Since we were broke and the route was lengthy, we set a 2-day target to make the 2015 M drive around the end of on the second day. We were in the middle of nowhere at around 2 o'clock p.m. After driving for around 20 hours and having about 2 hours left, we assumed someone had been pulled over or something when we noticed this bright blue light in the distance. They appeared to be blue police lights and were extremely bright. It took us a very long time to find the light, but when we did, it wasn't a car. Instead, it was a woman standing in the middle of a creek in the middle of nowhere in far northern with a dazzling array of blue lights surrounding her. I messaged him about it a few years ago because it had always stayed with me, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't a dream, but it turned out to be the strangest thing I had ever seen. The light seemed to be coming from her, and it scared us so much that we just hurried away. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the trip and eventually lost contact. He recalled the same thing and said he wished he had forgotten. I investigated further and discovered that a small town had been washed away by a flood many years prior, killing many people. My family and I used to stay in a very reasonably priced beach cottage in the area, so we weren't the only ones who saw what we did. That night, when we first started staying there, I was only 13 or 14 years old, and I used to stroll about and talk to the local kids. They were startled that I was staying there, and I didn't believe them. Outer Banks, North Carolina, was a converted life-saving station with a lookout tower and everything. I thought they were just trying to scare me because kids will be kids, but I was wrong. The first few nights were peaceful, but every night after that, something would happen. My aunt said her bed shook violently and rose off the floor, knocking her to the ground. She spent the rest of our vacation sleeping in the car. I'm a brat kid, so I assumed she was intoxicated. I stayed upstairs in the room where they kept rescued and dying sailors. One morning, I was afraid that no one was there because one of the beds had overturned while I was asleep. The following night, I woke up to more banging and loud laughter coming from the tower. So I assumed it was my sister on the phone, but no one was there. As the days passed, I started to feel like someone was watching me whenever I took a shower or went to the upstairs restroom. The banging in the tower had become nightly by this point, and I was frightened when I woke up one morning after sleeping in as a teenager and saw my relatives attempting to enter we spent several more summers there, but every time the same thing happened. The house washed away during a hurricane, leaving only the tower on the beach. It's a shame because I'd love to stay there as an adult and enjoy the sea. But after a morning at the beach, every single door in the entire house was deadlocked from the inside. I once saw something move out of the corner of my eye when I was home alone at night and glanced over at the bottom of one half of my scarf that I had draped over the top of my bathroom door, which was suspended at a 20 angle, including the lights turning off and SL items flying off of shelves and SL counters. At this point, a lot was going on in my apartment, including physical pains down my back, which made me afraid to be there. I ended up getting dressed and leaving the building before I started crying and called my grandmother to come get me. At another time, My friend and I were smoking outside the building when I was the only occupant of the building. When I heard what sounded like someone thrashing my apartment, I'm talking about chairs being smashed into walls and shelves being tipped over. We hurried upstairs to apprehend the person, but nothing had been moved in my apartment, and all the other units were locked. I checked, but I never saw a ghost. Everyone detested entering our building when we first moved in, saying things like it felt off my ex. I didn't initially feel that way and assumed everyone was exaggerating, so by the time I moved, I stopped talking about ghosts and watching anything even slightly paranormal in my apartment. Eventually, I watched Paranormal Activities at I'm not religious, so I didn't attribute it to a demon, but I don't know what it was, and I can't explain the chill I felt. Similar things were happening in my own home, and I haven't experienced anything like it since I moved. It sounds more like a poltergeist than a ghost. Take a look at the stages of a poltergeist taunting term, since I didn't think it belonged in any category. All I know is that it got worse the longer I remained. I'm not sure why, but it was beyond my scientific ability to demonstrate that my elder sister's previous apartment had many strange problems. She had it exorcised. My then 18-month-old niece was lying next to my sister, attempting to take a nap, and my boyfriend would come in from work and feel like someone had punched him in the back of the head on multiple occasions. It turned out that someone had been murdered on the doorstep and that someone had died in the house twice. One night when I was staying over, I had a horrible nightmare in which a demon was trying to kill me. I screamed at it to get it to stop before fighting it off. The following morning, my sister came into the living room, looking very groggy, and told me that she could hear her daughter laughing, saying, "Stop, I'm going to bed now," and trying to play with an invisible figure. Around 1 in the morning, she had a terrible nightmare about a demon attempting to kill her. My nightmare coincided with hers since I reside in the house my late brother used to own, which we moved into after he had moved into his father's house when his father passed away. It was a win-win situation for my brother and me. About a year after we moved in, he moved out to his dad's house, but he decided he had had enough and made his own decision. He wanted to fix it up to sell, then move back to his old house where my fiancée and I currently live. We were only going to rent it until we could close on a different house after his death. My fiancée and I bought my brother's old house to keep it in the family. Over the next few months, we noticed a few oddities, such as the office door being slightly open when my fiancée and I hardly ever go there, or a light that was on, but we were both positive it was off when we left. A few months went by with a few of those odd incidents that we assumed were unimportant. Then, one evening, as I was brushing my teeth and getting ready for bed in the bathroom, my fiancée was already lying down in the bedroom. We were shouting jokes at each other from the other side of the hallway. My fiancé then made a joke that reminded me of my brother, so I said, "You're lucky, brother. His name isn't here. He'd get you for that one." Then the bedroom light went out, and my fiancé chuckled nervously and said, "Haha, that's hilarious. Where's the remote?" I peered into the bedroom and gestured to the remote that was on my bedside table across the room. After that, my fiancé was really uncomfortable. I won't lie. I was 2 years old at the time, but the light has come on a few more times over the past few years. I'm not a big believer in the paranormal, but I can't explain it, and if these things are actually possible, I'm just glad to know. In my previous job, I supported an off-site team in a building that was once the state's mental asylum, and I'm talking old school here. Some of the chairs still had straps, and some of the shackles in the basement were for electroshock therapy, but my brother is still around and still teasing me. Name it, it was haunted. There were rumors that the ghost was Jenny, a nurse who died while on duty. I'm not sure how she died, but I believe she was knocked over by a patient and hit her head. She was harmless but enjoyed pulling practical jokes. 2 things happened to me when I was by myself. The break room was between the main. The former Menudo singer Live-in Law Vita Locas puzzle would appear and disappear at random as I walked between Ricky Martin's office and the classroom. However, the office and classroom were close enough that it would be impossible for someone to enter and put it there and then take it out, especially given how frequently it happened. I was a little stressed that day, so naturally, as I stepped out the front door. I felt like I was pushed and slipped on ice in front of the door. I caught myself easily. So I thanked Jenny for being kind. The elevator was broken, but it wasn't a big deal because I had no equipment to bring in or out, just auditing inventory. It was strangely quiet. I wasn't hurt again, and nobody was in the building when I went camping with a group of friends at a friend's family property. They had a huge, dingy shop with old tools and furniture that was really eerie, as well as dirt floor clown paintings. In the loft, we didn't even joke, and we stayed up late drinking by the fire, and I was the last one inside, awakened. I went to the side of the store to urinate and stood about 5 feet away. Looking in through the window, a fluorescent light was on, and I saw what appeared to be a piece of paper or a dollar floating around. At first, I thought it was a moth, but it was moving in a very rhythmic, flowing figure-8 pattern that reminded me of dangling a carrot, which I watched for what seemed like an eternity, before it swiftly drifted back to the dark corner of the store. A wood chair near the corner added to the eerie atmosphere. It might have been a moth. I sat down by the fire again to finish my beer and smoke, since no one else was awake. So I played robot. For a while, I was playing Unicorn Attack 2 on my phone when I saw my friend Mark leave his tent to urinate and then return to sleep. Figuring that sleep sounded good, I went to my tent and dozed off. The following morning, while we were eating breakfast, Mark mentioned, "I saw you guys sitting by the fire super late." "How late did you?" I told him that I was likely at 2 or 3 in the morning. Then he said, "Who were you with?" "I was the last man standing," he said. "And when I got up to go to the bathroom, I noticed you using your phone and to people watching you play over your shoulder." He claimed that one of them appeared larger, so he assumed it was one of our friends, who was a bigger guy. He claimed that the other person was taller and thinner, but none of us are notably tall or thin, which alarmed me. There is a haunted house in South Carolina that is an old plantation house that is now abandoned, but we still own it. One time, we heard something jump off a bed upstairs, followed by footsteps that sounded like a dog, but it was the only dog in the house. I camp there once a year, but I don't go in the shop, and I go to sleep whenever my wife decides she's tired. House was right next to my feet, and for at least an hour. The sound kept repeating every 10 or so minutes. Only after I checked the room did the sound stop. Another time, I was home by myself when I heard a loud crash, as if something had been smashed. I hurried to the dining room, where I heard the noise and discovered that the enormous painting above the fireplace was broken and on the floor. The only way the painting could have fallen was if something had picked it up and smashed it, but the giant nail holding it in place was still there at an upward angle, and the string to the painting was still in place. I thought someone might be inside the house, so I called the police, and this enormous former football player from South Carolina showed up. Up tough as nails kind of guy. He searched the house with me, his gun drawn, and trembling visibly. He dropped his gun twice, trembling, and left soon after without finding anyone. Another time, I was lying in bed feeling ill, and there was a closet with an old door handle that was extremely difficult to open due to its enormous latch. The wood door grinds against the floor, and as I lie in bed, the handle begins to turn, and the door opens just a crack. I'm not sure how it happened, but I ignored it and went to sleep, assuming it was a dream. You know how those dreams can get crazy, but when I woke up, boom, was still open the following day while I was still in bed feeling ill. I can still clearly recall my right hand trying to choke me. I know it sounds crazy, but I was choking and had to use my left hand to stop myself. Eventually, I was able to regain control of my right arm, but I will never forget what happened. The room and bedroom were the master bedroom. Another time, I saw a young girl with blonde hair and a blue dress walking down the hallways. She never threatened me or did anything to me. She just vanished after entering the green room, which had green walls and about 5 living rooms. The house also has a cemetery next to it, and over time, the land was sold off. So we don't really own the cemetery. There are graves dating back to the 1700s, as well as one of a baby who was undoubtedly the house's original owner. On July 4th, a crazy neighbor named Willie shot it, I know this because he once visited our front porch. He introduced himself without a shirt, showed off his enormous scar on his back, and warned us to put away the lawnmower because someone might try to steal it. The mower was hidden on the opposite side of the property, and the only way he could have known we had one was if he had been wandering around our property anyhow. We haven't been there in about 4 years, and we're barely missing my brother in the head. Wiley's house burned down soon after he was inside, so we don't go back there anymore. You guys should do ghost tours or something to earn some cash, buddy. I don't ever want to go back there unless I have a gun or something. When I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, I lived with my grandmother in a double wide where you could sit on the couch in the living room. I don't know why he tried to shoot your brother. I think the fireworks irritated him while he was up. Perhaps it was PTSD. We called the police, but they were ineffective and did nothing. And you could see my bedroom doorway, the bathroom doorway, and finally my grandma's bedroom doorway down the hallway. In any case, my grandma decided to play hide-and-seek for some reason, and I saw her clearly as the day turned the corner and dash into the bathroom, which was in the center of the hallway before the bedroom. After she turned on the lights, I rushed into the bathroom and couldn't see her. I pulled back the shower curtain, but she wasn't there, and there was nowhere else to hide. It was a tiny trailer. At this point, I became very upset and depressed, and I started crying. I backed up, facing the bathroom doorway, until I hit the couch in the living room, and I called out to my grandma. Didn't respond a couple of times, which was really strange for her because she never ever allowed me to cry. My eyes briefly darted to the bedroom doorway, and I saw her standing there with a face that made me sick to my stomach. But she wasn't, because I could hear her begin to apologize from the restroom for causing me to cry and ask why I hadn't come to look for her while she's talking. The bedroom doorway is empty. The lights flicker on and off, and my grandma left the bathroom. I brought this up a lot, and she vowed until the day she passed away that I never came to check on her in the shower, that she was never in the bedroom, and that she had never deceived me or made me cry. When I was 3 years old, I told my parents that my great-grandmother had told me in a dream that her feet no longer hurt. I don't think she was the one who made me cry that day either, but I'll never forget it. It seems ridiculous now that it's all written out. She passed away that night from diabetes or something, and they got the call soon after I informed them that it wasn't paranormal, but rather a strange coincidence. I was sleeping and grieving the loss of my mother when I had what must have been a lucid dream, and it felt very real. She sat next to me, put her hand on my shoulder, said my name, and asked me what was wrong in the sweetest way. I said, "I don't know, Mom, I'm just so tired," and her voice sounded youthful and strong. The sound and touch startled me so much that I turned over, expecting to see her, wondering at the change in her voice, and finding that my alarm hadn't gone off, causing me to oversleep. My mother did me a favor, and I keep hoping to dream about her again. It was wonderful to hear her lovely voice, and it sounded like she was really far down. So I doubt people will notice, but here it is. Throughout my life, my mother claimed that she would haunt us when she passed away because she was a strange cat, and she lived her life believing when our mother would say that when she crossed over, she would send us a sign. We would naturally say, "Yeah, okay, how will we know it's you then?" She was a medium and could see ghosts growing up, so you would think I had the coolest, cookiest mother ever. But she did it to the point of embarrassment and made my brother and me huge skeptics. She always replied, "You'll just know." Fast forward to 2015, when my mother passes away on the anniversary of the massive house fire she was in as a teenager. She talked about the fire constantly, and it was obvious that it had an impact on her. It is 1:00 a.m., the day after she passes away. My spouse and I are sleeping in our apartment when all of a sudden we hear a smoke alarm. It's just as frightening as it sounds, is in movies, I'll tell you that. We wake up and rush to the living room where the alarm is, and rather than seeing smoke and fire, it's freezing. It's January in New England, so it's obviously cold. But my spouse's smoke detector just went off by itself. He repeatedly tries to press the button to stop it, but it never works. Eventually, he removes the batteries, and I can assure you that the alarm continued to sound for an additional 3 to 5 seconds. Long time for something without a battery. Even if you include residual discharge, it was the strangest thing. A few months later, my brother and I were discussing Mom and her habits. So I asked him if anything strange had happened to him since Mom passed away. He replied that the night after she passed away, his TV kept turning on and off by itself, to the point where he had to get out of bed to turn it off. As a bit of a skeptic about recovery, it's really odd that it went off a few times around the same time as my smoke alarm scenario. I'm not sure if I truly believe it, but I know that was my mother giving us the sign she always promised, in ghosts. But whatever that was, I think your mother and mine must have been identical twins, skeptic, and regrettably, she hasn't haunted me with any of her psychic books, beliefs, or even claims that she would haunt us. She passed away 10 years ago, and I used to cry when I saw her ghost, but she has never shown. I'm so sad to hear that. If it's any comfort, I've never seen an apparition. And when my mother does appear, it's usually through occasionally I'll visit a medium to check in. And strangely enough, she's never my main spirit guide, but I advocate visiting even if it causes extra problems since it offers me peace of mind. Even if it's just foo-foo woo-woo crap. Questions rather than answers for you since it helps you remember their spirit.